Hey everyone, hey from Tel Aviv. We're so happy and we're so excited to see you all here with us. It's really, we're humbled. Okay, so I'm going to start this great session. So a few words about who we are. So Red is a consulting firm. We help Fortune 500 companies and Silicon Valley startups from all around the globe solve challenges using the design sprint methodology. So I'm Aya. I'm head of education department at Red, and with us today are Ram Almog, our CEO, and our wonderful Gal. She's head of the digital marketing at Red ID. So what we'll do today? Okay, so we'll explain what's a design sprint. We'll also better understand the difference between a classical flow of product making and a design sprint, and we'll also share our case study of working with Sheba Medical Center to integrate AI predictive models for better COVID-19 treatment. So by the end of today's session, you'll be able to understand the difference between a classical cycle of a product building and a design sprint. You'll better understand the main challenges a design sprint can help you with. And you also see how design sprint can help you save time, save money, and a lot of heartbreaks. Okay. So that's how the process of building a product looks like, right? You learn about the product and the target audience, you define the problems, you think of possible solutions, you create a prototype, and you test it with users. Cool, right? Well, the thing is, life has different plans for us. And so this process takes a lot of our time. And it also takes a lot of waiting, you need to wait for the product team, and then you need to wait for the design team and for the dev team, and so on and so on. A lot of waste going into this. And the worst part, we've got nothing left out of the, excitement and interest we had when we just started the project. We're exhausted and the team is tired. So this is Jake Knapp. You might have heard of him. He developed the design sprint methodology to make teams work faster, work better, and with higher sync and focused on the important and relevant problems. So that's how the product cycle looks like. We have an idea, we build a product, we launch it, and we get feedback from users, and so on. But as I mentioned, life has different plans for us, and so the build process takes longer, and then it takes longer and longer until we can't even see when this launch is going to happen, right? And that's why the design sprint is super relevant. We have an idea, we test it in front of users before we invest millions of dollars and waste a lot of working hours. So remember this? Now it's this. This is how a design sprint week looks like. The first 2 days of the workshop are together with the design sprint team. This is a combination of different teams joining together to align and decide on possible direction and solution. So in the first half of this day, we decide together what challenge we want to solve. And on the second half of the day, we dedicate this section to create a lot of possible solutions to this challenge. On Monday, we vote on the best and most relevant solutions. And in the second half of this day, we define the prototype using a storyboard. On Tuesday, our design team starts building the prototype. We also make sure there is a representative from the sprints team, and we also make sure to recruit relevant users and schedule interviews. On Wednesday, we test the prototype in front of 5 users, and then we take the data we received from the users and we formulate our recommendations for the relevant next steps. So this is just a small list of companies who use the design sprint as part of their working process. So the most important part of the design sprint is really to take an idea and turning it into something tangible, something you can test. And by the way, on October 27th, we plan to run a design sprint bootcamp at our Tel Aviv offices. Gal, if you can be so kind and share the link so people can read more and subscribe and register to this bootcamp. Okay, so we want to give you an inside information about one of our design sprint case studies. So today we're going to share all of the process. You're about to see how we ran the design sprint with Sheba Hospital. We'll also share the results we've got by the end of the design sprint. Okay, so Ram, I'm going to hand the session to you.
Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, so thank you all for coming. I'm going to tell you about our project with Sheba Medical Center. Sheba is one of the top 10 hospitals in the world, based on the Newsweek list. And it's actually an amazing place. It's a huge hospital and it's a huge medical center. And what we were, where we meet Sheba in point of time is last year when COVID started in Israel. It was everybody in the hospital was in frenzy, chaos. They formed a new department for, especially for COVID patients. And what we in the studio, we decided we want to have like a part of this. We wanted to help. So we called the Sheba Center. We said, look, we want to help you. And they said, how can you help us? And we said, well, we run design sprints. And if you have a big challenge to solve, we can help you. Now, we addressed the vision at the company called ARC. And head of the ARC was Natalie Block. She's in charge of ARC, which is an AI research center inside the medical center. So imagine there's like a team of developers and data scientists, and they work with more than 25 startups and organizations about integrating AI into the medical process. So there is a lot going on in ARC. And we addressed Natalie and said, well, we want to help. And she said, okay, so we opened these new COVID-19 departments. And we are now in the midst of putting some dashboards there just to help in the process. But we're not sure how that should look. We already did some trial and we want to make it more advanced. And we want to integrate some of the models. Now, at that time, they were building models with Intel to predict the deterioration of the patients of COVID. Remember, nobody knew anything about the illness, how it can be treated efficiently. And they decided really quickly, we will work on AI model, machine learning model. We will be able to predict who is going to deteriorate, and we're going to offer them treatment, better treatment. So this is how everything started. And then when we decided we were going to run that, and I said, okay, so we need to close a week. And there's 2 days of workshop. And they said, well, first of all, it has to be, usually we do it in person. We invite everybody to our offices, or we go to their offices where they say, look, it's COVID, everything is remote. And there is no way my team can be available for 2 days. So we had to rearrange this. What we did keep is the main structure of the sprint. So remember what I showed you about the structure of a design sprint. So the first 2 days are in-person workshops. And we had to adjust the process. So we're looking at defining the challenge, produce mass solutions, curate and vote, and define the prototype with a storyboard. So this was supposed to be with their team in person and couldn't be. So we rearranged the entire workshop and we divided it into 3 small 3-hour workshop because they couldn't make themselves available for a day. And that was one of the, we did remote the sprints before, but with Sheba, we had much more strict constraints on what they can offer. So we made this really short. Usually we have 4 workshops in which we also define and build part of the design of the prototype is done with the design team, but we decided to waive that. So it's an extra day from what we're usually working with, but it still is within a framework of a week. So that was the first adjustment we had. But if you look at the process, it's just the same. We define the challenge, we produce mass solutions, we curate and vote, and then we build prototype and test. Then, to save as much time as we can, we did as much as we could on a one-on-one basis before the sprint. And this is good practice for any sprint. Before we do any sprint, we talk one-on-one with all of the key stakeholders. So this is good to understand what are the politics, understand what are the ideas, and just invoke the team to come up with ideas. So we talk with some of the team, with all of the team that's going to participate. This is Natalie and Moshe, he's a doctor that helped us there, and all these teams. Some of them were in the sprint, and some of them are just key stakeholders in the hospital. And so it was one-on-one. We asked them, gave them questionnaires, and we asked them to answer and look at what are we going to achieve in order to align. Also, what we build is kind of a user journey map. Now, this is something that is really useful when you work with any development, is to have a high-level overview of the process. And during those interviews, we came up with this user journey map. Okay, so I will go back. We'll see how this is used later. But this was built during the stakeholder interview to save time. Now we go into the actual sprint. So we met on the first Zoom session. We used Mural as a remote desktop, remote whiteboard tool. And the first session is about understanding the challenge. Now, understanding the challenge is a big thing. Einstein once said that if you have a life-depending problem you want to solve, then he would spend 95% just analyzing what the challenge, and the rest of the time, 5% he will spend on solving it. So we spend an entire Zoom session on defining the challenge, what that includes. So there are 3 steps. The first step is expert interview. What we do is we look at the user journey map. I went through that with the design team, design sprint team. Just I didn't say that before, so I'll say it now. So in the design sprint team, we had Natalie, we had data analyst, we had R&D representative, we have a doctor that is in charge of these dashboards, and we had a designer and me, and so around 7 people. And I showed them the map we had and asked them to describe the process. As we describe the process, we asked the team to record all the challenges they hear. This is important because it makes you look at the challenges from the user perspective. Usually when we start analyzing challenges, we think about our challenges, our business challenges, our operational challenges. But what we really want to do is think about how we can solve real problems to our users. And this exercise, going through the user journey map and recording the challenges as we go, and every participant in the team wrote those challenges, and I'll show you how it looks. It looks like this. So every team member just records them and write them in a very specific format we call how might we. We phrase the challenge into an how might we sentence looks like that. How might we make sure the simulation process is effective? How might we ensure data transparency? How might we make sure clinical team uses this right? And then we vote, each one of the participants vote on the top 3 challenges they think are most important. So finally, we have prioritized 5 how might we, because we can't solve all the challenges, but we can prioritize them. That helps us understand what are the main things we need to address in the sprint. So after doing the expert interview, and we're already in the challenge space, this is a state of mind that we want to be in when we create products. In a state of mind is the user point of view and the challenge point of view before we run into coming up with solutions. Many times I see people come in, they already have an idea for the solution. Then I ask, what problem are you solving? And they're not sure. So the sprint makes sure that we are focused on real challenges and we agree that these are the main challenges. Next, what we are looking at is how will success look like? And so we call it the long-term goal. And usually we say we start the long-term goal with a sentence in 2 years' time and complete it with the words that reflects how success will look like. Sometimes it's like top level will be number one result in Google, or will be number one go-to service at this and that. We usually want that to be more tangible, something we can measure. So in Sheba, what we had is in 1 year, we will have a standard protocol to interrogate AI-based tools into the clinical process, enabling us to try new developed models in less than a month and make real clinical impact. I want to unpack this because first you need to understand how we got there. What we ask is every team participant write on a note their long-term goal, and then we vote, and then the decide on the final long-term goal, and we adjust it together. So this is not a democratic process, but the decider hears everybody, and then she decides. Now, this was kind of a surprise for us because we came to help them, remember, with COVID. But Natalie had bigger plans for this sprint. And she said, well, I want to leverage on this sprint and put AI as something central in the way this hospital works. I want to push everything. I want to be able to be very, very flexible about it. So she set the goal beyond the COVID-19 problem. And that really, really changes everything. Because now we want to have something that can go on a dashboard on any department, and maybe it affects also the users. So we wanted to interview users that are also not only from the COVID-19 treatment team. A big thing, and that's one thing we changed. So that was the long-term goal. And the second thing we do is we ask, okay, we looked optimistically on how success will look like. Now let's talk about the sprint questions. What are we going to find out in the sprint? And we ask the participant to think about, look at the long-term goal and think about what can block us from getting there. What are the main obstacles we as a team need to overcome in order to make this long-term goal happen? And we ask them to phrase it in a sentence starting with the words can we. So again, everybody writes 3 or 4 can we's, and then we vote on the top 3, and then Natalie decides on the top can we's. So here I was a little lax. Usually we ask for 3 sprint questions, but here we asked 4 questions. So here, by the way, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat, and as we go, and I can answer as we go, or we can answer it later in the Q&A session. So moving on, can we questions. So let's unpack the can we question. Can we encourage the clinical team to give us ongoing feedback? Remember, these are AI models. They need user feedback. And we're talking about doctors that don't have time, or interns that don't have time to put that feedback. So we want to convince them to give us feedback. That was a big thing. Can we overcome the natural antagonism of different stakeholders? And we looked to measure this. If people that objects into putting these kind of mechanisms, there's a lot of risk in putting AI into a clinical process. The errors here are really fatal, and people resent these changes from many different good and not so relevant, like ego-based reasons. And we wanted to see if we can convince them to use. Can we get the clinician trust? Can they trust our models to predict or to recommend? And this is something we were really keen to understand, what makes them trust our data. And finally, can we impact the clinical treatment? This was very important to Natalie. She said, like, I don't just want to have dashboards so I can show like stakeholders in the hospital that we made an impact, and there are nice dashboard and it's a good press. This is not a PR thing. I want to impact the clinical process. I want to make it better. I want to save lives. And this was a big thing in our design. Finally, in defining the challenge, after we agreed on the main user challenges about the long-term goal and our sprint questions. Now we want to go back to the map and put the how might we's on the map. Where are the challenges in the user journey? And look at the can we question and ask ourselves, where on this map and who on this map do we want to user test? Because in a design sprint, we don't build the entire system. We don't figure out that all of the functionality in UX UI. We are only prototyping a very critical part of the user journey that we think will give us answers to our can we question. So we had the doctors and the nursing teams, and Natalie decided to go for the doctors and to select this part of the use. Now, if you look at the user journey map, it has three main parts. It's discover. How do they know that we have a service? How do we learn about that? How do users learn about the service? And how do we use it? And Natalie looked and said, well, I want to examine how we use it, but we don't need to take the intake of the patient. That's not that important. What we want is the ongoing process of monitoring the patients. So we have that, we know where we're prototyping, and we can move on to the next session, which is produce mass solutions. A big thing about design sprint is that it enables us to explore many different ideas, and every participant in the sprint will come up with a solution. This broadens our possibilities and open our minds. So the first step in producing a solution, and there's two steps, is lightning demos. Before we go into actually sketching a solution, we look at other companies or organizations that have similar challenges that we outlined, and we look at how they solve it. So this is how lightning demos look. We just asked them to take screenshot and explain why these can be inspiring. So we looked at Google Analytics to explain how trends can be shown and annotated. We looked at the COVID-19 public infographics for prediction inspiration. We looked at Jira to see how you can control priorities. We looked at we looked at Monday to look at top bottom and bottom up cooperation between different stakeholders. We looked at many different, as far as we can from the hospital, different companies that had similar challenges, and we see how their UX looked and what were their approach to gain trust, to do all these things that we were struggling with in the sprint. After everybody presenting their lightning demos, we went into four-part sketching. Now, some of the team couldn't make it to this session. So what we did is we recorded a video instruction on how to do it, and they did it offline, which is another perk of adjusting the process to what you can do. We kept the process. They did it on their time because it was like they had the entire day, but they just asked the instruction and did the sketching alone. How does a sketching looks like in a design sprint? So it's a four-part process. First, you do note-taking, which is just going over all of the challenge domain and just taking notes, getting the system fluid and running, your brain running on solutions. And then you start doodling. You start just writing, and that you take like 20 minutes. Each team member takes a pen and a paper and just start understanding direction on how solution can look like. Then we take an exercise called Crazy Eights. In this exercise, we force the participant to think about alteration to their doodling ideas. So we divide a page to 8 different sections, and we give 1 minute to think about alteration. It's pretty intensive. We have a video about this in our YouTube channel called creative under pressure. You can check it out how this is done. But this just forces us to go beyond our initial solution and think about alternates. Usually when we have a solution, we're so happy that we stop thinking about other solutions. But in many cases, our second or third or our eighth solution may be better. So shortly you explore that. You don't try and over iterate, but you do a short, it's 10 minutes only, and you iterate. Finally, we give 45 minutes and we do a 3-part sketching of a solution. And I'll show you how our solution looked like. And this is really interesting. So you can see the solutions we came up for the Sheba project. Now, bear in mind, none of these were done by designers. This is something that was done by each team member. And what you can see is you have a catchy title, a very simple drawing of the concept of how things can look, and some explanations on the site. So this is how the solutions look like, and it doesn't need to be nice. It just need to be very, very communicative, because before you get to show it, you need to understand it. I'll show you in a minute how that is done. So we had 7 different solutions for our challenges. And the next step is to curate and select a solution. So basically, the curation process is like a gallery. First, we let everybody go around in the gallery and discuss it internally with themselves. So how is that done? They go in a remote, in an in-person sprint, we hang everything on the wall and they go in the studio and do this. But online, we just had these uploaded to Mural, and we asked them to put a red dot on anything they found interesting. So this creates a heat map on the solution, enabling us to understand where are the interesting parts in the solution. But actually, the reason why we're doing this is beyond the heat map. It's because this makes people read. And a lot of the techniques in the sprint are geared to make us read, which is the equivalent of listen. And this is a big thing about sprints and the entire design sprint culture and methodology. When we go into a meeting, we either speak or we listen. We don't have time to think. And because of that, people are reactive, and they think as they speak, or they try to think what they will speak as they discuss. In a sprint, we give time to think. And going over the solution, we listen by reading, and we think by voting, by putting dot. They have no meaning other than make us pinpoint what's interesting and what is interesting for us. After doing that, we let every one of the team present her own solution. In an in-person sprint, sometimes the facilitator does that, and sometimes the team person. If there's enough time for the facilitator to talk to each participant, then the facilitator will do it. In this case, we didn't have any time, so each participant presented her own solution. We went through that. Finally, we voted, and you see here the purple dots are with initials, and we voted on which solution do we think should be our winning solution. And finally, we asked Natalie, that did not vote, to select a solution, and she can select also part of a different solution. So it can be kind of a combo. It doesn't have to be one. Participants just help the decider understand where the wind goes. And they vote and explain why they think this is a good idea. But the decider, we need to move forward. So the decider make a decision, and maybe she's wrong, but we'll know that really soon when we'll show it to users. So we vote on our solution, and finally we have one winning solution as a starting point. Here, the decider put her vote on the winning solution. This become our starting point. And the next thing we ask them is to think about the user test flow. One of the most difficult parts in design at all is going from abstract, from a concept, into real screens. This exercise is a mediator exercise. We ask the team to think about 6 steps, which will be probably 6 or more screens in the user journey we're going to show the users. And in this case, they just put it one after the other. And finally, we vote on that. And we, with the help of the decider, we come up with the flow. These are, and you can see that. So first we have the department overview, then patient card, then prediction rationale. We explain why the rationale behind the prediction, a feedback form, and so forth. So these are really concrete steps. They draw from the original solution, but the original concept, and the concept will be here, but we also think about the story we're going to show the users. So we selected the user test flow, and we thanked everybody, and the rest of the sprint was internally, because they didn't have time for us. Usually, we do a storyboard with the team. So a designer comes into the team and works on a storyboard. In this case, we did it internally, and we had a checkpoint with the client just to make sure. With Sheba, we had a checkpoint just to make sure the data and the information we're putting on screen is right. So it starts with storyboarding, and here this is original screenshots from our storyboard. So we went and did this really rough looking sketch, and you can see so you can see that there are the green user test flow nodes, and beneath each one of them, there's a screenshot. Next thing, so we show that to the Sheba team, making sure the information is right. And the next thing we do is we actually create a prototype. And I'm gonna take you really to see how a prototype looks, because that's something that is rarely shown in these presentations. So I think that's a really important perspective to understand how detailed this can be. And the most important thing is this needs to look real, because when we show something to users, they can't imagine how it should look or how it will be, how we will solve. It should be exactly, it should look real, it should look reliable, so they can comment on the actual idea. What we want to know is, are we solving a real challenge in a way that is usable for them? And you can see the first screen of our prototype. I'm sorry it's in Hebrew, because our users are Israelis. So here's the name of the department, a list of patients. You can see the list of patients. When you roll over them, you get additional information about that patient, kind of a preview of drill down for the dashboard. You see a predictive model score, and this shows what the AI model estimate is the risk for these patients, and it's sorted by the risk. It's called EWS. It's something developed in Sheba. And here you see the trend of that EWS score. So at a glance, you're going to see these trends, and you can understand what's going on. You can see also something we explored is you can see more information about equipment in the department, and how many easy patients, difficult patients severe patients we have, and about manpower. So we had additional info we wanted to share with the doctors using this dashboard. It's a conversation piece, okay? Next step, we drill down into a patient's, remember that in the user test flow, we go into a patient card. Here you see the progress, and if you remember our lighting demo, from Google Analytics, we took this as showing what really happened. What are the events that make sense out of this graph, which is a big thing for them. They don't have it yet. They have basic measurements on that patient, some background illnesses. And here, what you see in with the red sign is prognosis. What does the machine think is going to happen? And here it's written, the patient is about to deteriorate in the next 48 hours. This is a big alert, okay? And what are the supporting findings that the machine found, like saturation is getting worse, and additional information. So what the doctors are expected to do here is to click on treatment recommendation. And here they get recommendation on how to treat the user. And this is different treatment, and they can play and see the different model estimated what will happen if they'll be treated and what will happen if they're not treated. And you can actually interact with that. Now, this was totally rejected by the doctor. They said, no way. And that was a very important part of this. They really loved the prognosis. They loved the graph. They loved the history. They said, in no way we're going to recommend on treatment on our systems, because that takes away from the doctor their responsibility. If they're very tired and will not check this right, a bad treatment can happen. And we said, like, accept here, and said that there's no way you can do that. So think about everything we've done here. When we asked the doctor, we showed this to the doctor, they said, no way. And here we asked them to rate our predictions and said, well, can you please tell if you like it and what didn't work for you? And they said, well, no way. We're not going to spend time clicking 3 clicks for this. Forget about it. So remember, we had a canary asking, will we get feedback from the doctors? And they said, not this way. So basically, this is the main prototype, and you can see this is a conversation piece for a 45-minute user testing session. So after the prototyping, going back to my presentation, what we do is we user test it. And we did this on Zoom. We had scheduled 6 doctors from different departments, because we had a long-term goal involving not only COVID, and we got so much valuable information. And you see this doctor on the right, on the bottom left, they said that if he accepts this, and he was like a very skeptic, then we have a green light. And he said, well, you're in the right direction. He had many comments, many comments, but it was on the right direction. And so we are halfway through, and we're pretty happy. So 45 minutes with each doctor, and we got tons of information. And remember, we are a week and a half into that project. We have a high fidelity prototype looking real after it was tested with real users. When we do the user testing, we document it. We document our finding like this. So we have the names of the users, and you have the different screens and several questions. You see in red are comments we got, and in green are like, these are good feedbacks, and yellow just ideas. So when we look at that, we can see patterns of, yeah, we have like on the dashboard, we have some problems here. This vital configuration looks very good. We can move on. So this gives us like a high level understanding of our findings. And we're looking for patterns. If one user said this, that's okay. But if 5 or 4 or 3 users, that's stronger, and we get that. Following this, so this wraps the design sprint. Following this, they started working on that. But also we talked to Natalie and said, well, this is, we can do better. and she said, we want your help further. And we ran an iteration sprint. And in the iteration sprint, we did similar. We don't need the strategy. What we do again is we look at the challenges coming up from the prototype, and we prototype again, but we spend a little more time on prototyping, and then we do additional user testing. So this is what we did with Sheba, and the final result was a much deeper prototype with high acceptance of users. That concludes my presentation on how that would happen in Sheba. I just want to note that this was implemented, and it's an ongoing project, and was also presented in many forums by Sheba as how these kind of innovation run, because it was very successful, inclusive, and it made implementation further down the project much easier for the team and for the doctors. Yeah, it's yours from now on.
Okay. Ram, maybe you can share just again the presentation.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And let's go to the next slide, because sharing is caring. Okay, so guys, if you wanna, and ladies, if you wanna lead your own design sprint and learn more about it, and if you happen to be in Tel Aviv, we got your back. So this hands-on bootcamp that we're having on the 27th of October will teach you everything you need to know about leading your own design sprint workshop. So if you're interested in that, Gal will share a link to that in the chat. And Ram, if you can go to the next one. Yeah. Don't worry, no sweat. If you're not visiting Tel Aviv for the next month, we can help you as well. And also for the next 24 hours, and just for you, we offer our end of the summer sale. So today you can buy our design sprint online course and have our special discount. And Gal, can you share the link to this online course? And you'll also have all of the information tomorrow in the email. Okay. So I think now would be the perfect time for questions and answers.
So
we had like a lot of questions in the chat.
Let me stop sharing. People can see us. Okay. I want to go over the chat and see if we have like a question.
Yeah, so Yin is asking, what kind of data do you use to create these prototypes?
Oh, that's an amazing question. Okay, so the first thing you need to make sure is that the data looks reliable. You can't put lower mixins there, and you can't put numbers that don't make sense. If you show, and we had like really minor error in the first prototype, and we got like a 15-minute lecture of why this is bullshit. So part of building the prototype, we take, in Sheba case, we work with a doctor, and in most cases, we work with the marketing team or the R&D team, and we show them the prototype, and we make sure every single text or information makes sense. Also, it's about what we can do, or what we can say we can do, and the way we say it is also important. So it's really important that the team we're working on the sprint are really informed about the data we're working with. In many cases, sprint participants include customer care, will include salespeople, will include somebody from R&D, and depending on the nature of the sprint, in this case, we had to have a medical team involved in that. And Natalie is also a doctor, and we had several consultants there on the content. It had to look real, and this is where we get the data. Does that answer the question?
Okay, so let's go to the next question. Isa is asking, how do you ensure that the ideas selected by the decider and the solutions being made are still within the bounds of the main challenge, main scope selected for the sprint?
Well, First of all, it's the work of the facilitator to go back every step and read the long-term goals and the can be questions. So within each step we run through, step begin by reading them out. So it kind of goes into the participant's mind to understand the context. Sometimes people stray and go sideways, and this is also the work, the art of facilitating, pointing that out. And sometimes the decider says, well, I understand that, but this is what I want to check. And the worst case is that we will not be out of scope, but the user will tell us that, and we will learn different things. This is why we almost always recommend on doing a design sprint and then an iteration sprint, because on the first sprint, you learn so much. And if it's good, you have like 60% rate. That's a good sprint because you learned a lot. If you got 90% right in the first sprint, then I'm like, oh, maybe we didn't push ourselves enough. You get on the first sprint 60% and then you fix it. And on the second sprint, you will know, and you get 95% right. And you get that from the users. This is really exciting. So it's really recommended. And it's really important to come up in the state of mind. It's more important to get started than being right. It's more important to get started than being right. And making mistakes is an inherent part of creating products, good products. And what we want to do is create early mistakes so we have early learning from what we're doing.
We have another question about referring to the way we document the data. Olivia was asking if someone filled up the Miro as the sessions were running. So so basically we always try to work in pairs of two people. One is documenting the data and the other one is interviewing. So since we don't have enough time, since it's a sprint, we try to be as efficient as we can. So that's the reason. Sometimes we do, replay the recording and we hear it again because we want to refine and be sure. But yes, basically most of the time we work in pairs of two people. Okay. I'm looking for other questions. A lot of thank yous. Okay. We have a question. How to manage design sprints for a live product, which is constantly consumed by user and also development is ongoing for new features. Specifically in a situation where design team doesn't have more than 2 weeks lead time than development time.
So that's a common question, and you always need to think if design sprint is the right thing for you. Design sprint does not solve all. It's for big problems. If you have a feature that is totally central to your business, or it's going to take a long time to develop, and the cost of failure is high, then a design sprint usually is a good idea. But what's really nice about the design sprint is that it's structured from a lot of exercises that are all very usable during the product development process. Just today, just before this session, I had a 3-hour session where we had just the user journey map. We looked at the challenge domain. We did how might we's, and we sketched solutions. So it was for a feature, and we just made it shorter, and we explored just the solution, a little about the challenge domain, a little about the solution domain, and we did not do user testing because we don't need it. However, every exercise can be used like that, and the only thing you need to ask yourself, is it worthwhile to bring all these people into the workshop for that long of a time? And if the cost of failure is high enough, yeah, you should do that. And it applies even if it's an existing product. It doesn't have to be a new product, but if we are launching something that is central or pivot to our product, yes, for definitely this works really well.
Okay, so next question. Do you have any classes offering right now to enhance our skills? I'm currently a student for a UX UI bootcamp. Yeah, we have a lot of courses. Both of them, we have our Design Sprint Bootcamp at our Tel Aviv offices on the 27th of October. We also have an online course teaching you everything you need to know about design sprints. And Ram, would you like to add anything? Any other?
Well, this session happens every month, so better sign up, and we do one teaching. Usually it's hands-on workshop. So next month we'll have that, and you should. We have just coming up two public sessions, one with Petra Will and one with Teresa Doris, and you can check it out. Also follow us on YouTube. We have a lot of videos, short videos explaining UX concept, product concept, just for that, and that's our current offering. And just sign up for any of our activities and find out, because we're constantly doing that.
Okay. Okay. So just last questions, but because our time, I think, is running out. But Madura is asking, how do you budget for the project, since initially we don't have a good estimate of the complexity before the workshop?
I love that question. Really love it, because what's nice about the design sprint is that you know exactly what you get at the end, and you know exactly how long it takes. So we charge fixed price for any type of design sprint for any of our products. So if you want to run design sprint for clients, this is a very refreshing change from pricing UX, which is so difficult and you need to know upfront. With the design sprint, there is a structure, and whatever you can prototype in one day, you should prototype more. And it doesn't matter how complex this is. You need to prototype only something you can prototype in one day. And why is that? Because maybe you're totally wrong, okay, and you want to redo it. And the idea of a design sprint is research. It's not the final. You don't solve UX problems, you solve product problems. Second is that user testing can only take 45 minutes. After that, you can't ask anybody to give you feedback. And the prototype is a conversation piece. If it's too detailed, you can't cover it anyhow. So you need to be very focused on what are you prototyping, and the fact that the scope is so clear makes it so easy to budget it. And if you're a freelancer, I recommend that you start with like a rough estimate of how much you charge for a sprint, and think about the scope of your, like, for us it's at least 2 weeks of work, one of research. There's the research, the sprint, and the handover. And if you do a duration sprint, it's a 1 month process. So as a freelancer or a studio owner, you can budget that as a 1 month's work. Think about the team, just think like that. Then later on, charge for the value. Think about how high is the value for your clients and of solving these big issues. And that's how we want to price design. So something I think is very important to me is that design should be priced by its value and not by its commodity of time and material. So that's my 2 cents on this. I think I have a video on that too somewhere. Yeah.
Okay. We have another question. Do you still go through all stages in the design sprint process on the iteration sprint? If not, what are the stages you repeat?
Okay. Aya, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so basically we have the iteration sprint is pretty similar to the design sprint, with some changes. Well, maybe Ram, you wanna elaborate on that?
So we have, instead of 2 days of workshop, we have 1 day of workshop, and we don't need to go over the challenge domain. Instead of that, we analyze the user testing. We go through an exercise where we say what worked and what didn't work, and then we go into solution sketching immediately. So it's just a 1 day process for a workshop, and we spend 2 days prototyping instead of 1 day. So the prototype is more elaborative. It's more details. We kind of solve some of the UX issues there. We found out through the user testing, but the main changes is iteration sprint is 1 day workshop and 2 day prototyping, then user testing the same. We go through that in our online course in much more details and in our bootcamp.
Right. Okay, another question from Louise. Could you elaborate more on the Can We framework? What is it good for? What kind of insight does it produce? So maybe I'll take this one.
Sure.
So basically, we have the how might we questions and we have the can we questions. After we've set our long-term goal, thinking about how success will look like, we need to put our, negative hats on, and we need to think about, different challenges and the different things that might not get us to our success. And so we need to think about, all of the obstacles that we might encounter in the way to our success. So we need to think, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we make everything happen? So, forgot the word in English, but can we put this obstacle or other obstacle from our way and make this long-term goal happen, make the success happen. I hope I answered the question. Maura, maybe you want to elaborate on this?
Can-we's are used to examine what are the obstacles that stand before our long-term goal. That's how we see it. And these are questions that we get a yes/no answer by the end of the sprint. How might we just open our mind? So can we just serve to say, yes, if we answer 2 of 3 can we's in a yes, then we should pursue this solution. That's the idea. We have to finish this session. Unfortunately, it was so much fun for me. Aya, you want to wrap this?
Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone. It was really great having you all here. And we really hope to see you in our next hands-on session, monthly event. And take care. We'll see you next month.